This is Dane Wigington with geoengineeringwatch.org. This is installment number 8 of Climate Engineering Q&A. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can in these ongoing 20 to 25 minute segments. I apologize for not being able to get to all questions that have been submitted. I'll roll over other questions that remain into upcoming sessions of Climate Engineering Q&A. I greatly appreciate all those that took the time to write in with their questions. If you wish to submit a question to be addressed on Climate Engineering Q&A, you can do so through the following email address: questions@geoengineeringwatch.org. And this footnote before I get started: with each passing day, the climate engineers are further ramping up the scope and scale of their insanity, and the chemical ice nucleation factor in the equation is finally beginning to hit people's radar. The Texas incident was so blatant, so glaring, so obviously engineered that many people, thankfully, are now waking up to that component of the climate engineering equation. On that note, first question, Jake asks this: Hello, Dane. What link, if any, is there between chemical ice nucleation in geoengineering and artificial snowmaking at ski resorts? Thanks, Jake. Thanks for your question. There's most definitely a connection in that ski resorts use various components of chemical ice nucleation and or biological ice nucleation to help nucleate frozen material that they coat their ski slopes with. We shouldn't call it snow because it's not snow in the technical sense. It's not naturally nucleated. So the same is true with the cloud seeding operations that are now at an epic scale with the climate engineers as they chemically nucleate cloud moisture, creating a cold, dense layer of air that descends to the surface, and this chemical nucleated material is extraordinarily cold to the touch, and it starts to enhance that surface cool down. And again, you see the kind of damage it does to infrastructure and everything else. So most definitely a connection. It's just on a scale that's unimaginably larger. So all these processes, again, have unimaginable consequences, especially when we're chemically nucleating vast regions. And for the flora and the fauna, the web of life, these engineered cooldowns are absolutely catastrophic. And this is the lack of regard for the consequences of their actions for those in power when they think they can play God with the weather and keep business as usual, control those on the ground, subdue populations in such a manner. We truly face uncharted territory at this point. Thanks for your question, Jake. From Marta, this: why do they need to generate the high winds, or is that just an artifact? It's a very good question, Marta, and we increasingly see with the chemical nucleated events, they are associated with high wind as well. And what it would appear based on the data is that because the planet is warming so rapidly that now they need the wind to help the endothermic reacting process of these chemical ice nucleating elements. The wind enhances that endothermic reaction, just like a swamp cooler, an evaporative cooler. For those that live in the Southwest know how an evaporative cooler works. It's an endothermic reaction. As the water evaporates, it releases a colder area, a dense flow of air. Same on a much larger scale, of course, and with the chemical component. So the winds are, it appears, again, a way for the climate engineers to enhance the effectiveness of the chemical ice nucleating elements. But you don't see huge deposits of snow in many of these areas. It's a very shallow layer, 1, 2, 3 inches over vast swaths. They can create the headlines they need. They get the photographs they need of the white landscape, but not a lot of moisture in this material. Again, it tends to sublimate, which means it converts from a solid to a gas, and much of it bypasses the liquid state. So this is an artificially nucleated frozen material, behaves very differently than a naturally nucleated snowstorm. Next question from Julie. Where are all the stars? Question mark. Great question, Julie. And we need to hear from the astronomers. And we are, in fact, in some cases hearing from them, because we have these light scattering particles in the sky. It's radically hampering the astronomers. So it's part of the climate engineering consequences. When you fill the sky with such elements, it alters everything, even those things that are so fundamental for human contemplation, if you will, where we are in the universe, what's around us, and now that being blotted out as well as our blue sky. And it's important to remember that although these particles are not visible to the naked eye during the day, if you go outside at night, shine a bright light into the sky, on a day after heavy aerosol operations, even without wind and without any other dust blowing around. It looks like it's snowing. There's so much particulate matter falling through the breathable air column. It's staggering. It has to be seen to be believed. So thank you for that question, Julie. From Donald, my question. Who precisely is behind and financing geoengineering worldwide? Question mark. Thanks for your answer in advance. Donald, all roads lead back to those who print the money and those who control those who print the money. They're who finance militaries, thus they own countries. So we don't have a country with a government. We have a government that owns a country in that sense. Again, all roads lead to those who print the money. They finance everything down the ladder, all the way down to state, local governments, everybody who's dependent on this umbilical cord to the money printers for their paychecks and their pensions. From Mike, this question. Hi, Dane. We love the info on your weekly program and tell everyone to, quote, look up and tell me what you see, end quote. Our question is COVID also being sprayed in the air using planes? Mike, let's connect some dots and you can come to your own conclusion on that. We do know that the world's second most recognized geoengineer, Dr. Ken Caldera, now works for Bill Gates. We know that Ken Caldera, we have the audio of him stating so on the record, what he did for the DoD, Department of Defense, was to design pathogens to seed into clouds to infect the populations below. We know Bill Gates posted on his own website, gatesnotes.com, I believe, that Ken Caldera was his, quote, most amazing teacher. We know Bill Gates has spoken about the need to reduce global populations for decades. We know from peer-reviewed science study from Italian researchers that CV-19 has been found attached to atmospheric airborne particulates. We know that the first wave of countries that were infected by CV-19 occurred over about a 3-day period. Second wave of 85 countries confirmed CV-19 over a 3-day period. 85 countries, again, 3 days. Do these dots connect? Is there an aerial dispersion going on? I'll leave it up to you to decide. I'm not going to give my conclusion. It seems that's not allowed anymore. But bottom line is, take all those dots, connect them, come to your own conclusion. From Paula, this question. Why do you think Phoenix, Arizona has doubled their planes? Question mark. Now 8 planes sometimes. Paul is referring to an increase in atmospheric aerosol dispersions over the southwest. We see this happening all over the globe. It waxes and wanes depending on the operations that are being carried out in any given region. But the bottom line is, again, we know that although many commercial aircraft are grounded, we know that the U.S. DoD, Department of Defense, has leased at minimum 800 commercial carrier aircraft. What are they using those aircraft for? That blank's not difficult to fill in. The climate's imploding. It's collapsing. We don't face global warming. We face an abrupt climate collapse. Every single day that the climate engineers are allowed to continue their operations in the attempt to use weather as a weapon, in the attempt to mask the true severity of climate implosion by engineering events like we just saw in Texas and we're seeing in other parts of the country and the world, and they sensationalize these events and thus convince those that don't want to believe there's any problem with the climate in the first place. They convince them that it can't be that bad because look how cold it is on the ground. And of course, Texas back up to 75, 80 degrees now after a week. And we have temperatures at the North Pole, top of the world, today or tomorrow, forecast to be at or above freezing. We just had the first commercial shipment across the polar route in the middle of winter because there's almost no sea ice there. We are free-falling into completely uncharted territory. When the ice is gone from the Arctic, when the Arctic Ocean heating goes exponential and the methane at the seafloor releases, we are going to be living on a different planet, a very inhospitable planet. So bottom line is back to the plains over Arizona. The only thing the military-industrial complex knows how to do is double down on their insanity again and again and again. They can't see past their immediate quest for total power and control, even if it brings the entire planet down with us. That's why there's so many planes over Arizona. Thank you for your question, Paula. From Jason, a parallel question on CV-19. Jason states, I have a question regarding the ScopeX project and whether or not there is any evidence the SARS-CoV-2 is being deployed in the atmosphere via high-altitude aerosol injection. Well, first, Jason, on the ScopeX climate engineering project, that is nothing more than a red herring. Something designed to make the public think that climate engineering is just a, quote, proposal. Think of the absurdity of that so-called test, that they're going to take a hot air balloon to bring a few pounds of material into the atmosphere and dump it. How insane and absurd is that, and ridiculous, in fact. And we obviously, if we were going to do something like this, which we have been for 70 plus years, we're going to use an aircraft to do this. We don't need a hot air balloon to carry a few pounds into the air. We can take a KC-135 to take 100 tons into the air at once. So again, this type of, quote, geoengineering experiment is just designed to continue the facade that climate engineering is just a, quote, proposal, when in fact it has been fully deployed for 3/4 of a century or longer. We're living in an asylum where it's socially unacceptable to acknowledge the climate engineering elephant in the sky. And again, in regard to the CV-19 pathogen being attached to airborne particulates, peer-reviewed science study has already proven that to be the case. Moving on, from Virginia, this question. I've been suffering from chronic upper respiratory problems for a very long time now. I wake each morning with phlegm so awful, I about choke to death trying to expel it. I cough up a lot of yellow and green gunk as well. I live in Camino Island, Washington, across the bay from Whidbey Island Naval Base. I'm aware of what's going on just about every day since I've lived here, which is now going on 8 years. They're spraying our skies horribly out here, and I know that I must be getting sick from it. Virginia continues, I have a horrible, painful problem with my feet as well. They get like mottled red, burn-like. They have a fever of about 125 degrees, and they peel like sunburn after getting very dry and cracked open. Are these common problems of what is being sprayed on us? I'm so miserable all the time and so tired I don't want to get up in the morning. I hear jets flying now and have been all day. Very, very sorry for what you're having to endure, Virginia. In regard to the skin issues, we hear of many such issues from many people. They're very diverse symptoms. And there can be many related factors, and certainly the inhalation of toxic heavy metal and polymer particles likely a part of the problem. In regard to the respiratory ailments, absolutely must be connected. Whatever other factor is in the equation, that must be a core factor. Again, the air column saturated with unimaginable quantities of heavy metal and polymer particles, hugely inflammatory to the respiratory system. These particles are extraordinarily bioavailable and bioaccumulative. It means they're very easily absorbed, and they accumulate in our systems. And this accumulation is, at some point, lethal. And how long can this continue? How long can the human organism continue to sustain this type of exposure? We're going to find out. If we can't halt climate engineering, sooner or later, we will all succumb, along with the entire web of life. Again, Virginia, very sorry that you're having to endure this kind of suffering, but let's all keep sounding the alarm, and perhaps we can reach a critical mass of awareness. If we can do that, we have a chance of stopping climate engineering from the inside out. From LC, this question. Dane, thank you so much for taking the time to answer our questions. I was wondering if you believe or agree with the data coming from Arctic News Blogspot. I tend to stay away from it because not only do they deny the ongoing climate engineering agenda, they actually promote it in their, quote, climate plan as a viable means to combat global heating. LC continues, however, when I visited it, i.e. Arctic News Blogspot yesterday, I was aghast to find that they had raised their potential rise in global temperatures to a whopping 10.2 degrees C, that's Celsius, by 2026. LC then continues with this, stating, that, of course, would imply that most of the planet would be dead long before that date. Even a rise in 10 degrees Fahrenheit would be bad at this point. Let me stop there for a moment. First, the Arctic News Group. Yes, they are covertly pushing climate engineering as a last-ditch potential to stay off a total planetary meltdown. So think about this, coming from, quote, academia, coming from, quote, the experts. If they can't see the climate engineering elephant in the sky, if these so-called experts are so criminally ignorant of the very field of study in which we are told they are experts, how do we even quantify the level of insanity within our species at this point? That the experts have absolutely no clue of what's going on, or they are paid liars. One or the other. In regard to the temperature rise, if we stay on the current path. That is a very, very real possibility. A 10 plus degree rise centigrade would mean the planet is done. Life on Earth is done on this planet. And that is exactly the direction we're headed. And yes, by 2026, is that a possibility? Yes, it is a possibility. Because of the feedback loops that are fully in swing right now, again, we face an abrupt climate collapse. We have never been here before. The planet has never been in this position before. Human activity is the core causal factor. Climate engineering, a key part of that factor that is making an already horrific situation far worse, not better. So for those that don't understand the severity of that kind of temperature rise, that's the end of the road. And it doesn't stop there. There's no data to indicate that such a process would stop there. It would continue to accelerate into what's known as Venus syndrome. If you want to learn more about Venus syndrome, search geoengineeringwatch.org Venus syndrome and learn what none of us want to even contemplate. But that is the path we are on. Likely right now, based on frontline data, we are past 3.5 degrees C of warming. And that is being masked from populations. And the events like the engineered winter mayhem in Texas is part of how they masked the true severity of planetary warming. And then Texas rebounds right back up to the 75 and 80 degree range. How hard is this to figure out? Chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. There is no legitimate discussion about climate, anything from any perspective, without first and foremost including the climate engineering operations, and there's no legitimate discussions about that without including the chemical ice nucleating factor. LC finishes with this. Who the heck runs that site, Arctic News Blogspot? Question mark. Sam Carana, that's the name of the author that's posted on other articles. And LC has figured out that, in fact, this is not a real person. It's a pseudonym for a group of scientists. I've communicated with several of these scientists. LC asks, is there any possibility of getting them, these scientists, on our side with the latest data? Question mark. Or are they exaggerating the data in order to make a case for, quote, experimenting with SRM? Question mark. First, these are all exceptional inquiries, LC, and thank you for your line of questioning. No, I don't think there's any possibility of getting these individuals on our site, and I can name one that I've debated with. His name is Paul Beckwith, and if you search geoengineeringwatch.org, debating the climate engineering issue, I think is the name we had on that particular post. I debated Mr. Beckwith. He's a scientist from the University of Ottawa. Again, he's part of this group. Did 2 live on-air debates with Mr. Beckwith. Those debates were conducted by WBAI Radio, Pacifica Radio on the East Coast. And after the second debate with this individual, none of that group wanted any more of it. They know that the facts don't support their side. That was readily evident during the course of these live on-air debates. And they don't seem interested in the truth. They seem interested in whatever narrative they are ideologically compelled to push, or that they are pressured to push from somewhere above. And in regard to, again, any exaggeration of the data in order to make a case for experimenting with SRM, in answer to that question, LC, unfortunately, no. There's no exaggeration in regard to the severity of what's unfolding. Thank you for your question, LC. From Gail, this question. Would sending your brochure, that's our 20-page fact and photo summary booklet on geoengineering. Gail states, would sending your brochure to our state representatives do any good at this point? Question mark. Will they have the same results that the rest of us do? Question mark. Ridicule, conspiracy labels, shunning, etc. Question mark. Gail, listen, your question is very valid, and the answer is yes. It does do a tremendous amount of good to send these booklets. It's our most effective tool of all. We have about 250,000 in circulation. We're increasing that every day. And sending these to representatives, agency officials, elected officials absolutely matters, because even though so far all these types of officials have chosen to turn 2 blind eyes to the climate engineering assault, as the ship goes down and they are forced to face the fact that they are on it, heads may come out of the sand that they are currently in, and they will be more interested in fighting to save their own lives, their own posterity. So by passing on this credible data, you are planting seeds that will soon be forced to sprout. The undercurrent of awareness is already much more vast than is yet visible, and we need to feed that current in every way we can, passing on credible data from a credible source. Again, geoengineeringwatch.org, striving to be that source, rock solid data and compelling printed materials with hard science in it. That's the kind of materials we need to see. Credibility means everything in this battle. Thank you for your question, Gail. Justin asks this: how can anyone residing in or near Redding, California, again, that's near my hometown. I live about 20 miles northeast of Redding in the wilderness. But Justin asks again, can anyone living near Redding, California be of unique assistance to your cause or learn of upcoming presentations and events that you plan to participate in? Thank you for your question, Justin. No events on the schedule because of the CV-19 scenario. Of course, had that not been a factor in the equation, we planned on staging a massive free event in Sacramento, California. All our events have always been free. All our materials at those events always free. And we planned such an event for the release of the Dimming documentary. Now we are unable to carry that part of the release out, but the film is very near completion. The moment it's done, it will be available to everyone, everywhere, for free. We will encourage even a DVD duplication of this film and distribution by anyone who chooses to do so, so long as the film is not being sold or monetized in any way, shape, or form. We're not even doing that. Our only goal is to sound the alarm while there's still something left to salvage of our planet, before our planet's life support systems are so decimated that there is no chance of salvaging anything. And we are perilously close to that point. Make no mistake about that. But again, Justin, back to your question of how to help. Taking geoengineeringwatch.org printed materials and putting them in the hands of those who need to know and who may already know but have not seen credible data yet, that is immensely helpful. And if we can reach the tipping point of critical mass of awareness where this issue is blown out into the open and everyone everywhere in every country understands what their governments have done to them without their knowledge or their consent, committing them to an experiment on the planet and its life support systems, an experiment from which there is no return. If we can reach the point of raising that level of awareness, wheels will turn on their own, and we have a chance of stopping these programs from the inside out when military members are forced to realize that they are killing themselves and their own posterity with the rest of us, that what they're doing is not some benevolent planetary saving act. It is, in fact, a certain death sentence if we continue on this course of climate engineering operations. And again, that's not to negate all the other forms of human activity that are laying waste to planet Earth. We have been unimaginably horrible stewards of this planet in countless ways. Industrialized, militarized civilization is in and of itself a death sentence without climate engineering. Add climate engineering to the equation, we have accelerated the scenario radically. But bottom line is, if we could expose the climate engineering operations and all the ramifications from them, we would have taken a quantum leap in the right direction. We need to make that leap soon. We are running out of time. Next question from Jesse. Jesse asks, are there any direct initiatives or court actions? Jesse, our team sued the Canadian government. That legal action started in 2016. It went on until late last year, at which point the Canadian government terminated the case. Not surprising. They certainly do not want this issue coming to light. Now we have the CV-19 scenario, which is yet one more desperate action by those who wield the levers of power. I will leave it at that. Our attempt to file in the U.S. has been hampered by the same scenario, the CV-19 scenario. Certainly that would seem to serve those in power very well also. Now it's up to us. It's up to us to force this issue to the full light of day. And again, if we can do that, and that was the sole purpose of the legal action anyway, to force a critical mass of awareness. So now it's up to us, all of us. We're the ones we've been waiting for. And we can accomplish this if we all pick up this torch and help to carry it forward. The rest of Jesse's message to geoengineeringwatch.org follows. Jesse says, it's not possible for me to hand out materials, etc., but I am willing to do anything that I can to help, i.e. with my time or money. You can, from your own home computer, Jesse, if you find the email addresses for agency officials, environmental organization officials, environmental article authors, elected officials, and you send them the appropriate geoengineeringwatch.org reports, whether it's on chemical ice nucleation, engineered droughts, engineering wildfires, you land this email in the right box, the right location, you can start a spot fire of awareness. And all of us can do this for free from our own home computers. But thank you for your willingness to stand with us in this battle, Jesse. And Jesse continues with this. My mother had chronic lung conditions, and if she stayed inside with HEPA filters running, she got better. But as soon as she went outside, her condition would deteriorate, and there's just no way to live. hiding in a house all day. She eventually wasted away and passed. I think as more people start to have these sorts of experiences where you lose family members to what is clearly, as you articulate well, an assault on the total biosphere, more people will be looking for answers outside of the mainstream. That's if, of course, their cognitive function and programming allows them to do so. Final statement from Jesse. The amount of chronic lung conditions must be totally off the charts, judging by the people around me and myself who have chronic coughs, etc. Let me back into this, and you're certainly 100% correct about that, Jesse. All of us have this inflammation in us at one level or another. Again, there's no place to hide from these toxic atmospheric particles, heavy metals, polymers. They're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Some of us are stronger than others, but it is affecting all of us. That is absolutely true. In regard to waking people up, yes, can't hide from this any longer. You can't put this in your rearview mirror, and all will be forced to wake up. Let's hope that it happens soon enough to still alter the equation, because right now we are on the fast track toward near-term planetary omnicide. So all those who are caught up in the orchestrated mainstream media political theater of the absurd, specifically designed and scripted to distract populations from the wider horizon, that trend must be shattered. It must be shattered soon, because we are rapidly running out of time. We must focus on the biggest hole in the bottom of the boat. And right now, that is what's happening in our atmosphere, which is statistically and mathematically speaking the greatest and most immediate threat we face short of nuclear cataclysm. It connects to everything that we are currently challenged with, including CV-19, because at minimum, the particles, as Jesse just stated, are hugely inflammatory to our respiratory systems. They weaken our immune systems, making us more susceptible to any and every form of pathogen, including CV-19. And back to the discussion at the beginning of this Q&A session, when CV-19 has been found attached to atmospheric airborne particulates, as peer-reviewed science study has proven conclusively, how can we not consider this in this equation? Do we think those in power are simply too benevolent to possibly engage in such a practice? Why would we think that when even as of 1977, based on historical record, the U.S. government had already conducted, as a matter of record, 239 open-air biological tests on innocent, unknowing U.S. civilians? They do whatever they want because they can, because the public has allowed them so far to do so. As Edmund Burke stated, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men and women to do nothing. And there are too many people doing exactly that, nothing. Pretending that if they just toe the line, if they just do what they're told, that everything will just magically work out. How's that going so far? We are being herded off the edge of a cliff. We do not have much time left, and those in power could not do what they do without the active or passive support of populations. When will that support stop? It's imperative for all to understand we are in a very real and immediate fight for life right here, right now. The threat is not somewhere out on the horizon. It's kicking in the front door right now. We must make every day count. Final question for today's Q&A session from Z-Con. Question. First, a comment. Z states, although you are the bearer of bad news, I confess that is true. I must continue, Z states, to listen to you each week as the mass distraction we get from the mainstream media is nauseating. It seems that you are one of the only truth tellers out there. Thank you, Z. I will do my best to stay at my post. Z continues, is it safe to say that if God does not intervene, then we as a planet, or rather a species, will be doomed to extinction? Question mark. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your question, Z. On the current course, short of some unforeseen intervention from some unforeseen source, mathematically, statistically speaking, we face certain near-term planetary omnicide, certain extinction for our species. Near-term means less than a decade. If we can alter that course, the outcome may be very different. We can't know with certainty. We're in completely uncharted territory. But no matter how dark the horizon, what greater form of solace could there be than to take one's last breath knowing that you did everything you could to sound the alarm, to stand solidly in the chasm between the collective insanity and what yet remains of the miraculous web of life? Yes, the odds are against us, but the battle isn't yet lost. We can't know what allies we may have that are not yet apparent or visible in this equation. I don't pretend to comprehend the miraculousness of creation, of this miracle planet, or of the total consciousness of the web of life. I do know that while struggling alone in the wilderness, working at a furious pace to restore habitat over the course of many years, I have at times made grave mistakes that for a precious few seconds I believed would be my last. On a number of occasions, for example, while falling large dead snag trees left over by loggers that had laid waste to the forest, I've had unseen rotted tree trunk cores break loose without warning, causing 100-foot-plus trees to slip their stump, tilting a towering mass down right on top of me. What was only milliseconds seemed as if in slow motion. More than once, I believed I had made my last mistake, and each time, somehow, someway, an impossible deflection occurred. Only inches from my feet and legs, a crater several feet deep with 5 tons of tree trunk rammed into it. Why was I still standing? I laid on the ground for hours after one such event and stared into the sky. I listened to the wind through the forest canopy, and I pondered the bonus time I had just been given, yet again. I wondered over and over, is the planet a living organism that somehow knew I was there to help, to heal, in any way I could, until my last breath? I know this. We don't own our lives. We owe them to the whole, to the web of life, to creation, to the Creator. And if we collectively dedicate ourselves to this epic battle for all that matters, we may yet accomplish profound good even at this late hour. We must not yield to the fading of the light, ever. Please forgive my rant, but such contemplations are at times difficult to restrain. It's been 20-plus long years of nonstop slogging in this battle for me, and I am very grateful to every single activist and individual that has joined me in this effort. I can't express my gratitude to each and every one of you. I'm out of time for this week's session of Climate Engineering Q&A. My deepest thanks again to all that have submitted questions, and to those that have submitted questions that I was not able to get to yet, I'll do my best to answer as many as possible in the next installment of Climate Engineering Q&A. If you wish to submit a question, please do so at questions@geoengineeringwatch.org. Until next week, stay safe, stay strong. This is Dane Wigington with geoengineeringwatch.org.